In 1998, a game show became enormously successful in the United Kingdom with its trivia questions and promised to win £1 million. That was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and its format and popularity made it a natural candidate to be translated to multiple markets, including the United States. Michael Davies was the producer who ultimately took on the task of bringing the show to America, although it was not until Regis Philbin accepted the hosting position that ABC agreed to pick it up. Debuting in 1999, the American version of Millionaire became an enormous ratings success, and I was one of those viewers excited to see what questions would be asked on that stage. But why did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire become such a sensation on ABC? One of the main factors was that it was constructed in such a way to be genuinely pulse-pounding. While the questions started off relatively easy, they would get more difficult the longer the contestants sat in the hot seat, thus raising the stakes and the incentive to want to answer correctly. While other game shows might have a group of contestants each buzzing against the other to answer the question correctly, or working in teams, most of an episode was spent on a single player looking face-to-face at Philbin and having direct conversations with him. They could take as long as they needed to answer the question, and it was fascinating watching them try to solve it, whether through deduction or digging into that brain full of general knowledge. And as a viewer, you were either as stumped as they were, or you didn't know what it was and was just waiting patiently for them to get it right, or you groaned when you knew they picked the wrong one. Another interesting decision was that unlike most other game shows, the host was not told the answer beforehand, and unless he knew what it was, found out at the same time as the contestant whether they got it correctly or not. There were of course the 3 lifelines to help out the contestant, although those were not foolproof, and they still had to think for a little while before feeling confident enough to reveal their final answer. 50-50 eliminated 2 of the wrong ones, but the possibility existed of keeping the 2 the contestant was struggling with. I think it was actually a bad idea for contestants to say which of the 2 they were trying to decide between, because there's a strong chance those were the 2 that would remain after 50-50 was selected. Norm Macdonald even made that point when he was on the show in a special celebrity episode. The second lifeline was phone a friend, where the contestant could call someone for help. When I was younger, I wondered how they were somehow always there to answer a call when the show was being recorded, but they were obviously pre-selected and knew at what time a contestant would be potentially calling them. Of course, this was sometimes not helpful either, as 30 seconds were given for the question to be read, and then to guess, and they might not know at all. So it would either be incredibly helpful or a waste of a lifeline. Ask the audience was often the most likely to help the contestant, although as the questions got more difficult, they were more likely to split the vote. Seeing how far the contestant could go using these lifelines was part of the fun. Another major reason for the show's success was the music. Keith and Matthew Strachan wrote several memorable themes for the original British version of Millionaire, which were then reused for the American edition. There was the main theme, which had a triumphant and exciting quality to it, and then there was the music that played for the final 10 questions. It was a tense piece of music that sounded almost like a beating heart and matched the uncertainty the contestant faced as they tried to figure out what the answer was. I think the music in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire might be the best in game show history. Regis Philbin was an excellent host too, and added further personality to the show. He would often have amusing banter with the contestants, and there seemed to be a genuine desire from him to see them win. In many ways, the show was very much a two-hander as we watched contestant and host try to figure out the best course of action. And even though outside of rare occurrences, Philbin probably never saw them again, he gave the sense that they were becoming friends over the course of their time on the hot seat. I think there was also a wish fulfillment element, as while you were trying to answer the questions along with them, the thought crossed your mind that maybe you could compete on the show too and potentially win $1 million. And many did try to be on Millionaire, although they had to go through a telephone challenge, and even if they were selected, they would have to get through the fastest finger round, which was dependent on both knowledge and speed. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire did provide a number of classic moments during its run. The first $1 million winner was John Carpenter, who did not use a single lifeline except phone a friend on the final question. And he used that to call his father and tell him he did not actually need his help. He just wanted to let him know he was going to win $1 million. On the opposite side, you have the contestants who get it wrong before answering the $1,000 question correctly, and so would leave with nothing. The first person who did this even incorrectly guessed the $100 question wrong when he said Hannibal crossed the Alps on llamas instead of elephants. There was also that moment when a contestant walked away because he was not sure whether Frodo was a Pokemon or not. And that was a $500,000 question, believe it or not. There was also that young Indian man who went on the show just to reunite with his long-lost love and managed to win the $1 million prize. Wait, no, that was actually the movie Slumdog Millionaire. Back to the actual show, there would be special episodes too, occasionally centered on a specific topic. The one I always remember is the movie-themed episode that aired the same week as the Oscars. All the questions were either movie or Oscar related, and while I do easily know the answers to most of them, even I'll admit the contestants face some toughies. If they were not brushed up on Oscar history, or not seen or remembered the movie in the question, they would be stuck. Like I mentioned before, there were celebrity episodes where famous people competed for charity. Norm Macdonald was a memorable contestant, and Jack Black also brought a lot of energy when he played. The thrills and excitement of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire made it a show that was easy to be engaged in, and that helped to transform to something people look forward to tuning into every week, thus becoming the most watched show on the air during its first season. And as I said at the start, I was one of those viewers enraptured by it, to the point I even got the official Millionaire quiz book, which featured questions like the sort featured on the show. I also got the CD-ROM game, specifically the second edition, which I greatly enjoyed playing. Developed by Jellyvision, the same company responsible for the You Don't Know Jack trivia games, they did an impressive job of transferring the show to a computer game format, and Regis Philbin even recorded specific sayings reacting to your answer and your eventual winnings, although they seemed to make him cheekier in the game, as he tended to crack jokes at your expense whenever you ended up with $0. He even got strangely annoyed when you ended up with $1,000. Nonetheless, I spent a lot of time playing this game, and even though you're not playing for actual money, it managed to capture the feeling of being in the hot seat. Now, some of you might be wondering, if Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was such a monumental hit, often topping the ratings, why did ABC cancel it after only 3 seasons? Well, the problem is that the network became a little too reliant on the show, airing it multiple times a week. There was even a point when it was on for 5 nights. This oversaturated the show, and people eventually got sick of it. Even I lost interest at a certain point and stopped regularly catching episodes. This would cause the ratings to decline, and even after ABC decreased the number of weekly airings to 2, that was not enough to revive its popularity. While the daytime syndication show was being prepared, ABC tried to come up with ways to improve the fortunes of the primetime version. One idea floated around was having Philbin host the syndicated show while a comedian would take over the primetime Millionaire. Jon Stewart and David Spade were among the names being considered as a potential new host. However, the idea was scrapped, and ABC chose to cancel Millionaire in primetime in 2002, although Philbin did return to host a couple of specials. For the syndicated version, Meredith Vieira was selected as the host, and I think she did an okay job from what I've seen. Her style was to be approachable and sympathetic to the contestant, looking genuinely upset when they lost. I did not watch it much as I sort of moved on from the show, but when I did catch the occasional episode, I found myself surprised at the changes they decided to implement. One of the biggest was adding a time limit to each question, thus adding more pressure to the contestant. I think part of the appeal of Millionaire was seeing the contestant think about the answer and deduce what it might be, with the editors usually removing the dead air spots where they were likely thinking quietly to themselves. The time limit turned into more of a beat-the-clock type game show, and a lot of contestants probably got questions wrong they might otherwise not have because of the rush to have an answer before time ran out. The syndicated version also utilized a shuffle format where the questions were given out of order, which I also don't think was the best idea. The lifelines were also altered. Because of people quickly Googling the answer, Phone a Friend was removed. For a few years, they had Asked the Expert, which served a similar function. Meanwhile, Double Dip allowed the contestant to guess 2 possible answers, and Switch a Question gave them the option of getting a different question if they were stumped on their current one. These changes I don't mind though, and provided their own help. Vieira would announce her departure from Millionaire in 2013, with Cedric the Entertainer, Terry Crews, and Chris Harrison filling the hosting role afterwards. Although Regis Philbin did consider coming back to host the show again, that never happened. In 2019, it was announced the syndicated version would end its run. However, not be long before Who Wants to Be a Millionaire made its return to American airwaves, when Jimmy Kimmel hosted a new iteration starting in 2020. This one seemed to return to the classic format, including bringing back the original lifelines, although because of the pandemic, Ask the Host took the place of Ask the Audience, and then when the audience was able to return to the studio, that was added to the lifelines. This revived version of Millionaire uses primarily celebrity pairs for some reason, with Matt Damon even showing up to continue his fake feud with Kimmel. While entertaining at times, I do prefer the contestants being regular non-famous people. I personally feel it ups the stakes and makes things more exciting. But looking back at the original ABC run of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, as you can see, there's a reason it captivated so many and made us all wonder how we would do if placed in the hot seat. It was able to stand out among the pack of game shows out there and showcase people thinking about the knowledge and trying to make the most logical move, and it was a lot of fun to watch. See you next time.